Something changed at 9:30 on Sunday evening. The monitors all displayed their typical patterns, organized, systematic, predictable. Yet beneath that digital veneer, the actual infrastructure supporting worldwide commerce was experiencing a critical failure, and the silence around it felt deafening. My background is in private commodities research. For over a decade, I've been monitoring metal markets and accumulating physical silver, eventually launching this platform after growing frustrated with traditional financial media's perpetual lag behind the data streams flowing through my professional terminals. This digital representation you're seeing is simply the most efficient method to disseminate time-sensitive information to individuals who prioritize staying ahead of conventional reporting cycles. Currently, while market commentators attribute recent movements to post-holiday portfolio adjustments or link elevated copper valuations around $2,500 to artificial intelligence infrastructure expansion, my analysis reveals an entirely different narrative developing. The prevailing message suggests supply chains will normalize. The focus remains on quotations, but those numbers aren't the real story. The actual story concerns infrastructure. The foundational systems channeling global metal commerce are experiencing severe stress. And what appeared to be a standard rally has transformed into something far more concerning: the complete exhaustion of accessible refined copper inventory. This represents the type of shortage that can't be resolved through monetary policy adjustments or corporate announcements. Mainstream sources continue asserting adequate metal exists within the system. The inventory figures on my screens indicate our cushion has compressed to roughly 72 hours. Somebody's assessment is fundamentally incorrect, and market prices will soon reveal precisely who. Let me outline what's converging. We've reached what I'm characterizing as a convergence of critical factors. The catastrophic situation at Grasberg, coupled with a phenomenon most observers have never encountered, treatment charges entering negative territory, has pushed conditions beyond mere tightness into what resembles a terminal physical shortage. Understanding what this means is crucial. We've transitioned into a phase where digital quotations no longer determine what you'll actually spend to secure physical metal. Price formation is occurring dynamically, and the process isn't pretty. I'll explain the mechanics behind these negative treatment charges, the factors silently devastating smelting operations worldwide. I'll calculate the implications of the 600,000-ton shortfall that major financial institutions are forecasting. Finally, I'll outline my personal strategy for navigating conditions when COMEX Copper approaches the $6 threshold. Once you grasp how negative treatment charges function, you'll understand why major financial institutions have grown suddenly concerned. Let's examine our current position using concrete data. This evening, figures show LME Copper positioned at $12,537 per metric ton, representing a 42% increase from year-ago levels. COMEX Copper sits at $5.91 per pound, directly confronting the psychological $6 level that industry participants are monitoring closely. This extends beyond copper alone. Silver has reached $72.75 per ounce. We're witnessing contagion spreading across tangible assets, and the pattern has become unmistakable. Here's the catalyst. The dollar index is positioned at 101.40, beginning to exhibit weakness. When dollar strength diminishes while metals advance, that configuration creates the environment we're currently experiencing. Now examine inventory figures carefully with me. LME copper stocks stand at 145,325 tons. Within the past 48 hours, 2,100 tons vanished. Let me contextualize those numbers. At prevailing global consumption rates, 145,000 tons represents less than 3 days of supply. 3 days. That's not strategic inventory, that's a margin of error. Here's where conditions become uncomfortable. I've been monitoring paper markets displaying these orderly, clean quotations, while receiving unconfirmed reports from retail operations like SD Bullion allegedly shifting to pre-order only frameworks because they cannot source physical product. The screens indicate normalcy. The physical marketplace is communicating something dramatically different. Inventory is depleting at rates that make force majeure events appear less theoretical and more inevitable. When I reference force majeure, I mean situations where major institutions cannot fulfill contractual delivery obligations, and exchanges must intervene to modify operational rules mid-cycle. Now let's discuss the mechanism most participants don't comprehend. This section requires your careful attention because it explains why the shortage has become so acute. The concept is negative treatment charges. Here's the standard operation. Mining operations extract copper ore from earth. That ore isn't refined copper, it's concentrate, essentially copper-bearing material. Miners then compensate smelters to transform that concentrate into refined metal. That fee represents the treatment charge. It's straightforward commerce. Miners possess ore, smelters possess refining infrastructure. Miners pay smelters for processing services. Currently, treatment charges have inverted to negative values. This means smelters are compensating miners for the privilege of refining their ore. Pause and consider that. Smelters are losing money on every ton of copper they produce. Why would any operation accept this? Because smelters carry enormous fixed costs and operate massive industrial installations. You cannot deactivate a copper smelter like flipping a switch. Allowing furnaces to cool and equipment to go dormant risks destroying millions in infrastructure. Restarting cold smelters can require months and enormous capital if it's even feasible. Smelters are trapped. They require concentrate to maintain operations, but insufficient concentrate exists. The shortage originates at the raw material stage. Consider this analogy. Imagine owning a juice operation with a $50,000 industrial processor that absolutely cannot sit idle or it seizes permanently. But there's an orange shortage. You're so desperate to keep that processor operational that you begin paying people to bring you oranges. Even though you're losing money on every glass you sell, you're not pursuing profit. You're avoiding the catastrophic cost of equipment failure. That's the current reality for copper smelters. They're consuming their own capital just to remain operational. Here's the frightening aspect. When they finally surrender and shut down, refined metal supply doesn't just decrease, it halts. Smelters are hemorrhaging in silence. When the first major smelter closes, that 3-day inventory buffer we discussed earlier will suddenly seem luxurious. Now let's calculate the actual deficit because the numbers exceed most expectations. Freeport-McMoran's Grasberg mine, among the planet's largest copper operations, experienced a major incident. That disaster has officially eliminated 313,000 metric tons from 2026 supply projections. JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs both forecast a global deficit ranging from 330,000 to 600,000 metric tons for this year. But here's where it becomes more interesting. Unverified rumors suggest China's state grid is quietly accumulating an additional 20% beyond their normal reserves. If accurate, the actual deficit expands to nearly 800,000 tons. Let me frame the impossible equation we're confronting. A 600,000 ton gap in global supply against 145,000 tons sitting in LME warehouses. You cannot subtract 600,000 from 145,000 and expect economic functionality on the other side. Let's consolidate where we stand because this forms the foundation everything else builds upon. Grasberg is offline. Smelters are paying miners just to prevent equipment failure. The global warehouse is effectively empty, and your screen still displays 591. The mathematics indicate price must reach a level where demand gets forcibly destroyed, where industrial consumers simply stop using copper because they cannot afford it or cannot obtain it. That's not speculation, that's arithmetic. Now I know the skeptic's response because I've heard it repeatedly this week. Aluminum substitution will solve this. At $12 to $500 per ton, engineers will simply swap copper for aluminum in their designs. Let's examine that claim. Yes, aluminum can replace copper in certain applications, but you cannot substitute copper for aluminum in power transformers or high-performance EV motors overnight. You're discussing re-engineering entire systems, retooling manufacturing facilities, recertifying components for safety standards. That process requires 18 to 24 months minimum. We have a 3-day inventory problem. See the disconnect? The substitution argument assumes we have time. We don't. Here's another one. High prices will mobilize scrap. Copper exists in old buildings, old wiring, old infrastructure. The market will find it. I want you to actually consider this because the scrap narrative sounds compelling until you examine the data. Yes, elevated prices will incentivize scrap collection. People will extract copper piping from abandoned structures. They'll recycle old electronics. There will be a short-term supply bump. But scrap is a one-time event, not a renewable resource. Once you've stripped copper from every old transformer in every condemned building, that's finished. You've exhausted the pool. Scrap doesn't replace a mine the size of Grasberg. It doesn't replace 313,000 tons of annual production. The scrap surge is a temporary bandage on a severed artery. It might buy weeks or months, but it doesn't solve the structural problem. So what happens next? What should you actually monitor? First, watch for exchange panic. I'm anticipating the LME or COMEX to increase margin requirements by 50% or more within the next week. They'll present it as cooling the market or ensuring orderly trading. What they're actually doing is attempting to force out speculators and reduce system stress. When you see a sudden massive margin increase, that's the exchange signaling fear. Second, and this is significant, watch for cash settlement whispers. There's an unverified rumor about a 5,000 contract delivery failure. I cannot confirm it, but if a major bank or institution cannot deliver physical copper on a futures contract, the exchange has two options. Let the default become public and trigger a crisis, or force a cash settlement. Cash settlement means the contract holder receives dollars instead of physical metal. It's effectively a default on the physical promise. If that happens, if COMEX or LME starts forcing cash settlements on copper contracts, you'll know the game is over. The paper market will have officially decoupled from the physical market. Here's my personal monitoring dashboard. 3 things I'm tracking in real time. First, $6 on COMEX Copper. That's the demarcation between a rally and mania. If copper breaks $6 and maintains that level for 3 consecutive closes, I'm mentally shifting into parabolic mode. I'm not chasing price there. I'm observing from the sidelines. Second, LME stocks below 100,000 tons. If inventory drops beneath that threshold, I'm expecting an exchange level force majeure. That's the point where industrial consumers start panic buying and the entire system locks up. Third, the gold to silver ratio. If it drops below 60, that signals silver is leading the charge. It indicates hard asset contagion is accelerating, and copper is just the canary. When exchanges start modifying rules mid-game, you know the house is losing. Let me outline my personal strategy. This is what I'm doing with my own capital, my own portfolio. I have 3 specific triggers I'm monitoring. Trigger A, victory away. If COMEX Copper breaks $6 and holds for 3 consecutive closes, I'm shifting into parabolic mania mode. I'm not chasing price at that level. I've witnessed this pattern before. When things go parabolic, the exit becomes very crowded very quickly. Trigger B, if LME inventories drop below 100,000 tons, I'm expecting a force majeure event at the exchange level. That's the threshold where the system cannot function anymore. Here are my actions based on those triggers. If copper hits $13,000 on the LME, I'm personally taking 25% of my mining equity profits off the table. I don't want to be the last person through the exit when the music stops. I've been in this space long enough to know you don't get a bell at the top. If silver dips back to $65, but the gold to silver ratio stays below 65, I'm looking to add to my physical silver position on that retest. That dip would be a gift. If exchanges hike margins by more than 30% in a single day, I'm sitting on my hands. I do not trade in high volatility rule change environments. When referees start making up new rules mid-game, that's when people get hurt. I'm not here to be right. I'm here to be liquid when everyone else is scrambling. Now I want to address something directly because I know some of you are thinking it. Why should I believe you? How do I know this isn't just more hype? Fair question. Here's my answer. I've been doing this for 12 years. I've watched silver hit $49 in 2011 and then crash. I've watched copper spike and collapse. I've seen forced liquidations wipe out traders who were certain they were right. I'm not trying to sell you a course. I'm not trying to pump a specific stock. I built this platform because I have access to data feeds that most retail investors don't. And I was tired of watching people get blindsided by news that was 12 hours late. You don't have to believe me, but you should verify the data I'm giving you. Check the LME inventory numbers yourself. Look at the treatment charge trends. Read the Goldman and JP Morgan reports on the deficit. The information is out there. I'm just connecting the dots faster than mainstream outlets. And here's what makes copper's situation so critical. This is not like oil, where you can just park a tanker offshore and wait for prices to rise. Copper is consumed in real time by the global economy. Every electrical grid, every EV motor, every data center, they're all burning through copper constantly. When the buffer runs out, things don't slow down gradually. They stop. We're talking about rolling blackouts because grid operators cannot replace failed transformers. We're talking about automakers idling factories because they cannot get wiring harnesses. We're talking about construction projects halting because there's no copper pipe. This isn't a financial crisis. This is a physical crisis with financial consequences. And the scary part? The paper markets are still pretending everything is fine. The price on your screen is still behaving like this is a normal supply-demand imbalance that will work itself out. But I've been watching the physical premiums. I've been tracking the dealer reports. I've been monitoring the scrap flows. And the physical market is screaming that we're running out. There's a moment in every market dislocation where the paper price and the physical price diverge so far that the paper becomes meaningless. We saw it in nickel in 2022 when the LME had to cancel trades and halt the market. We saw it in palladium when Russian supply got cut off. We're watching it happen in copper right now in slow motion. Let me give you one more piece of context that ties this all together. The reason negative treatment charges are so significant is because they tell you where the bottleneck is. If the shortage was at the smelting level, if we had plenty of concentrate but not enough refining capacity, treatment charges would be increasing, not decreasing. Smelters would be raising their fees because they'd have pricing power. But treatment charges are negative. That means the bottleneck is upstream. It's at the mine level, and you cannot fix a mining shortage quickly. Opening a new copper mine takes 7 to 10 years from discovery to first production. Expanding an existing mine takes years. The Grasberg disaster is not getting fixed in 2026. The supply that was supposed to come from that mine is just gone. And here's what keeps me up at night. We're already in a structural deficit. The demand from EV production, from renewable energy infrastructure, from AI data centers, all of that was already pushing the market tight before Grasberg went offline. Grasberg was the thing that broke the camel's back, but the camel was already carrying a very heavy load. So when I look at the next 6 months, I'm not asking, will we see higher prices? That seems inevitable. The question I'm asking is, what does the system do when it runs out? Does COMEX force cash settlements and admit the physical market is broken? Does the LME implement delivery restrictions? Do major industrial users start signing long-term contracts at massive premiums just to secure supply? I don't know, but I know it's going to be messy. Here's what I want you to take away from this. We have a mining disaster that's removed over 300,000 tons from the market. We have smelters in a death spiral, paying miners just to stay operational. We have a global warehouse with 3 days of supply. And we have paper markets that are still pricing copper like this is a normal cycle. Someone is going to be very, very wrong. The screen says the price is $5.91. The physical reality says the price is whatever you have to pay to actually get metal delivered to your door. Don't let the paper markets blind you to what's happening in the real world. I've been in the space long enough to know that when inventory drops this low and the fundamentals are this broken, the resolution is never smooth. It's either a price spike that forces demand destruction, or it's a system-level event where the rules get rewritten overnight. Either way, the people who are paying attention early are the ones who don't get caught off guard. Now, if you want to understand how this physical squeeze is already spilling over into the silver market, because trust me, it is, you need to watch my previous breakdown on the silver price discovery phase. The dynamics are eerily similar, and silver is moving faster than copper right now. The clock is ticking. The inventory is draining, and the mainstream media is still calling this a speculative rotation. You've seen the data, you've seen the math, now you have to decide what you do with it. I'm not here to tell you what to do with your money. I'm here to show you what I'm seeing with mine, and what I am seeing is a market that is running out of time and running out of metal at the same time. Stay sharp. Watch those 3 triggers I mentioned, and whatever you do, don't assume the paper price is telling you the whole story. Because in about 72 hours, we're going to find out if that 3-day inventory buffer was accurate, or if we've been operating on borrowed time this whole week. This is the kind of moment where being early looks the same as being wrong, until suddenly it doesn't.